This video is an in-depth explanation of how while and for loops work in Python. So to start off, know that in general, loops are for repeating, I guess we'll repeat, code. So the first kind of loop we learned about is a while loop, and it will continue to run the code that's indented as long as the condition is true. So while, let's see, a is less than 6, maybe I want to print out a is less than 6. And then I can add 1 to a. Well, if a start out at 0. So in this example, a is 0. 0 is less than 6. So it's going to do all of this indented code. It's going to print out a is less than 6. And then it will add 1 to a. So a is now 1. 1 is less than 6, so it's going to print out a is less than 6. And then add 1 to a will become 2. 2 is less than 6, so it'll print out a is less than 6, and it'll add 1. Now a is 3, still less than 6, and so it'll print this out. It'll add 1 to a, and now a is 4. 4 is still less than 6, so it'll print out, add 1 to a, and now a is 5. 5 is still less than 6, so it'll print this out, add 1 to a, and now a is 6. When a is 6, 6 is no longer less than 6, so now this condition evaluates to false. So then we skip and we are done with all of this indented code. So this print showed up when a was 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, meaning we should see this run 6 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can repeat anything in a while loop. Just for these early examples, we're looking at prints and really just prints. So if I want to see how a is changing, I can modify my print to demonstrate that. So instead of printing out a is less than 6, maybe I want to print out the value of a itself. So this is going to show me that a is 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. And when it becomes 6, it doesn't go in this loop, so it never prints it out. As another example for a while loop, you can use input is another common way to use them. So I can make this maybe one where you have to enter your password. So I'm going to have an input. What's your password? So this code will ask for the password once. And while the password that is typed in is not equal to 1, 2, 3, it's going to continually ask you to enter in the password again. So guaranteed to ask you once, and then so long as you don't type in 1, 2, 3, it's going to keep asking you. So let me run this code so you can see what it does. If I type in anything that's not 1, 2, 3 exactly, not going to take. But as soon as I type in 1, 2, 3, then this condition becomes false. 1, 2, 3 not equal to 1, 2, 3, that's not a true statement, that is false. So we are done with the while loop and we do whatever is underneath. So these are two examples of simple while loops. One where we're adding the value, one where it's based on input. You might see a while loop that has an if statement in it, and those will work the same way. So I can check while maybe a number is less than 10. I want to print it out if it's even. So if num mod 2, remember that checks if a number is even, is equal to 0. That's Java. Then I can print out that number. And then I'll add 1 to number. And I'll start num at -6. So here, if I try to trace through without running my code, num is going to be equal to -6. -6 is less than 10. So now we're going to go inside this while loop. If num is an even number, which it is, we're going to print it out. And then regardless of whether or not it's an even number, we're going to add 1 to num. So then it'll be -5. -5 is less than 10, but it's not even, so we're not going to print it. And we're just going to add 1. -4 is less than 10, which is an even number. So that -4 will be printed out. And then I'll add 1 to it. So hopefully you're noticing a pattern where this num equals num plus 1 is not in the if statement. So it's always happening. I'm always adding 1 to num until num is no longer less than 10. So what's repeating here? I am continually adding 1 to number until num is less than 10. And sometimes I'll print it out. I will print out num if num is an even number. So we run that to show you what that looks like. Here's the password one. So it's going to run from -6 all the way up until 9, because I'm adding 1 each time until we hit 10. And it's only going to print out the even numbers. So that's why only the even numbers show up here. If I got rid of this if, it would print out all of the numbers. There you go. But that if makes it so it only prints sometimes, only if that number is even. Another time that you'll see if is using a continue. So remember that continue skips everything that is underneath, and then it's going to go back up to the top. So here, don't let the amount of code scare you. Less than 10, it's going to repeat all of this code. 10. Then I'm going to add 1 to it. So num is now. I would skip down and continue. It's not even. So I'm going to. And I'm going to print out. Comment out some code. So it's not. We can continue exploring. So I added 1 to num. Num is. So I'm going to add 1 to num. Now num is. Continue, which means I skip the print and go all the way back up. Add 1 to num. 3 is not even, so I'm going to skip this stuff and I'm going to print out. What is this loop doing? It's looping from 0 all the way up in the odd numbers, because these. This page and see if that's better. Oh, there we go. Now it works. So we're looping from 0 to 9, and it's only printing out those odd numbers. If I got rid of this continue part, it would print out all of the numbers. That continue allows me to skip the ones that meet this condition. In other words, skip the even numbers. That's our section on while loops. Now we're going to move on to for loops. Oh, actually, before we do that, loop control variable is the variable that's going to determine how many times the loop repeats. So in this scenario, A is our loop control variable because once A reaches 6, then we stop looping. In this example, password is our loop control variable because once password is equal to 123, then we stop looping. In this example, num is our loop control variable because we loop until num is less than 10. That variable that determines when do we stop looping, that is the loop control variable. So for loops, like while loops, also repeat code, but they repeat it in a different way. For loops are always going to start with the word for. They're always going to contain the word in. And then whatever is tabbed underneath is what's going to repeat. So my loop control variable is going to go here. You can call it pretty much anything you want. You can call it dog. You can call it pineapple. I'm going to call it X, so I don't have to say the word pineapple each time in this example. And the first ones we looked at were ones that had words or strings on the right-hand side. So let's make this the word dog. So for X in dog is going to mean that X, my loop control variable, is going to take turns being each thing in dog. X is going to be D, then it's going to be O, then it's going to be G, which means this loop is going to repeat 3 times. So that's why hi shows up 3 times. If I want to see a little bit more about what this loop control variable is actually doing, I can print it out. So X is going to be that D, then O, then G. If I add other text onto this, my loop control variable does not become this exclamation mark. The loop control variable is still DOG. I'm just using that variable in different ways, gluing it together with different text, and so on and so forth. The reason that it's printing out vertically is because we learned that prints take up 1 line per print. So if I wanted to make this print all in the same line, I could do that trick we learned in Unit 1, where I can use end equals and a space instead so that it doesn't end in a new line. So for does not automatically mean, like for has nothing to do with it printing on each line. That's an effective print. Print prints once per line, but I can change that using end equals. But the real key part here is that X is my loop control variable, and it's going to take turns being each letter in whatever is over here. As another example, I can do for A in pineapple. And then I can print out each letter in the word pineapple if I would like. So this can be whatever variable you want. This can be any string you want. The part that we're looping over can also be a range of numbers. So if you see something that looks like for I in range 10, this is still a collection of things to loop over, but instead of letters, now it's numbers. So I is going to be 0 all the way to 9, not including this 10. So that's 10 numbers total, but 0 up until right before that 10. And again, I can print out something 10 times. And if you count that, pause and count, you will indeed find that that is 10 of them. Or I can print out something using my loop variable, my loop control variable, to see those numbers in action. So here, I is 0 all the way to 9. That is the first kind of range that you could use. The second kind involves 2 numbers. So if I decided to do for I in range 2, 15, that is going to start I at 15, and then I will stop right before this. So in this example, I will be 2 to 14. And again, this does not have to be an I. I could make this any variable, really. Still works the same. As long as these variables match, we're good. The third kind of range for for loops involves 3 numbers. So notice all of these are counting up by 1 each time. I can also customize that. So I can say for n in range 1, 100, 6, and then print out n each time. What this is going to do is it's going to start n at 1, and it's going to go all the way to 100, all the way to 99, excuse me, counting by 6. So I'm going to end up with 1, 7, 13, all the way to, I think, 97. If I did my math correctly. Oh, you do need a colon at the end of your for loop. So it's looping from 1 to 100, skip counting by 6. And just like with while loops, you can do more than just simple printing. We're using simple printing so you can see how this line works, that first line of the loop. But once you've got that down, you can use your loop to do just about anything. So what if I want to add these numbers? I could make a total that starts at 0. And each time, maybe I want to add n to that total. And then print out my total. If my total is out here, if it's not indented, that means that the print does not repeat. Only one thing will print in this loop. The part that's repeating is this addition here. It's going to add 1 plus 7 plus 13 plus 19 all the way up to 97. And I'm going to assume that that's correct. If I wanted it to print the new total each time, I could make it part of the for loop by tabbing it under. So this is going to print out each one as it's adding. You can also use ifs and continues with for loops as well. So I can have a for loop that's for x in range 100. And if x is an even number, then I'll print out x. So this will loop from x as 0 to 99. But it will only print out the even numbers because of this if. There's 0, and then we stop. 99 is not included because it's not even. I can use a continue here as well. If I add it in here, if x is even, it's going to skip that print. Remember, continue means skip what's left, go back up to the top. So in this example, it's only going to print out the odd numbers because the even ones hit this continue. The even ones skip the print. The last piece for this one is else. Else we've seen with conditionals, and if you have if and else, you have to pick one. Else does not work the same way with loops. Else means after you are done looping, you do the else. And this can work with for loops or while loops, works the same way. So it's going to do its thing, and then at the very end, it's going to print out all done. For now, unless you're using a break, this is exactly equivalent to just doing something like this. Does the same thing. And then you can also use an else on a while loop, works the same way. So I'm going to copy one of my loops from up above. Let's grab this while loop. So this is the one that is going to ask for my password. until I type in 1, 2, 3. Once I do, it'll say all done. Maybe be more accurate to change this to correct password entered. So type whatever the heck I want. Once I type in something that matches, it'll tell me correct password entered. And again, that is equivalent to, unless I'm using a break, which we'll learn about later, just putting it right after the while. Anything. Once I type in 1, 2, 3, it's going to hit that print. I hope this was helpful in your understanding of while loops. If you have any, and for loops, if you have any further questions, the internet is a great resource. You can also ask me during class. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.